So again, good morning. What I will do is, as we have a few more participants, I will go over with you the scoring mechanism for your blogs. The one thing I can say for you, and blogs are easy marks in the sense that I give you, if you make your comment, that has the highest weight. So a good comment from you to start your discussion board is always the best. And then there's an equal amount of marks that's given to how you respond to your colleagues, to your classmates, and viewing their blogs and maybe making comments on them. So if you make one comment or two comments, that's maybe worth a point. If you make 3 comments, that's worth 2 points. If you make 10 comments, that's worth more points. The reason is I'm trying to encourage participation, and as you read other people's blogs, then you actually continue to self-educate each other, and that's the purpose of those blogs. So I will show you that, although I will not give you a copy of the spreadsheet I use to control it because it is confidential with names of students and marks of students on it. But I will share some information today with you. This is the second half of the semester. Chapter 7, or this chapter on supplier selection, is the most important chapter of this half. If you're going to spend any time, a dedicated amount of time on the second half of the semester, it should be on this chapter. It is regarding how we will go about to evaluate and select potential suppliers. It is a critical activity for you from the viewpoint of if we do the right job in selecting the right suppliers, you minimize your administrative nightmares for many, many years to come, and you build yourself a competitive supply base that makes you as a company much better for it. So it's very strong activity. There also will be a major assignment given on this chapter, and it will be how for you to develop an evaluation tool. I shared with you previously the Honda document that shows how Honda does it, and although looks like a very complex process, which it is a complex process, that is the summary document that we use for making our decisions. You will get the opportunity to determine what's important for you to select a supplier, and then how would you evaluate and select a supplier out of, say, 3 suppliers that you've chosen. How will you select that supplier? Okay, you'll make the spreadsheet, you'll develop it. It can be as nice and sassy as you want. It can be professionally done if you're very good at it, or it can be fairly simple. All of it makes a difference, but what I'm looking for is the working capability of your spreadsheet to evaluate a supplier, one versus the other. That way, when you go to make the presentation that says, I would like ABC company to be the next supplier, is that you have a mechanism in place that shows your senior management staff why you have selected company ABC versus XYZ. And I think it's a very important activity. I think it's worth an assignment, and it's where you get to use your creativity, but truly understand why we need to select a good supplier. If you have the mindset that we will select the cheapest supplier, I think it's a wrong mindset, because cheapest or least expensive is a relative term. The price of a product or service may be less than anybody else, but the true value to the company and to your customer may be significantly different. And that's what we have to look at, is price is just a number. It's what do we get as a company from that supplier to help us maintain the most competitive supply chain. And if I have to pay a little bit more for a good company, then I will pay a little bit more for a good company, because it will pay off many, many times over in the future. So please take the idea of least expensive is the decision you should make. That may be the case, but if that's the only criteria that you have, then you've diminished your role as a supply chain professional to nothing more than a purchasing clerk. Anybody can choose the cheapest price. Good buyers select the best suppliers for the value of the company, for the value of the customer. And that's what this chapter is about. So it's important that you read this chapter. It's important you apply your time to it and understand it thoroughly, because it's got a lot of good information there. Okay? If if you can't hear me, or if for some reason we get interrupted, my internet signal is not looking strong today. It's not looking strong today because of the heavy rains, I think. But so if I lose you, I apologize. We'll try and reconnect again. But hopefully that you will be able to go through this. Okay, I'm going to take you now. I believe you should be seeing on your screen the PowerPoint slide. Just let me confirm. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go to the PowerPoint slide. As I said, I'll talk about your grade center and your evaluation method on blogs in a few minutes. But let's get started. We'll do some talk about the evaluation process. So when we talk about, anytime we talk the word evaluation, it means that we are going to evaluate one supplier versus the other. When I evaluate the students, and I don't evaluate the student versus one, I evaluate you as a student based on certain criteria. And I think the process for us needs to be, there has to be some criteria. So this, as I said, is maybe, I think, your most important chapter, maybe in both OPM 600 and OPM 620. Because if we do this job properly, it will pay you dividends for a long, long time. Okay, so let's talk about it. So your chapter overview talks about I want you to develop a supplier evaluation selection process. It needs to be a process because it should be done consistently, so that anybody who picks up your document or your decision flow, they will see how you arrived at your decision. And again, that's why you have a process and why you want to be process driven, because once you establish that process, then every buyer in your organization should select a supplier with the same logical method. And when someone says, when that supplier makes a mistake in the future, and maybe causes you heartache, causes your facility closed down, maybe causes a death of one of your customers, you want to know that you've done the right job in selecting that supplier. And if you use an established process, the company process, to do that, then there's no reason to think that potentially you selected a supplier because he paid you money under the table to do that, or he is your brother, or he is related somehow. That you go through the evaluation process so that it remains clear to everybody in the organization, should they look at that document, how did I select supplier ABC? Okay, and that's what you're trying to do here. We look at further supplier evaluation for key suppliers only. If you have, in General Motors' case, 60,000 suppliers, they've built that up over the years, but essentially they probably have not evaluated deeply 60,000 suppliers. They probably have evaluated a good number based on their criteria, but you can't, a chicken shit little small supplier who supplies you photocopy paper, we're not going to evaluate them. That's a price driven thing. So whether you use Staples, Office Depot, Costco to buy your paper from, that's a pricing decision. They are not complex suppliers. They are not suppliers that you're going to develop, and not a supplier you need to have develop a process for you. You're buying a product across the counter. So I do not evaluate any supplier where I'm buying something across the counter. I only evaluate price in that case. So be careful when you do that. So what's important is that you know how to develop a supplier evaluation, because many companies don't have one. Even now today, many companies just go for a quote and say, I'm based on a quote, which is price. Okay. And again, when you join your company and you begin your career in purchasing, and you begin to make your mark in that profession, this is one area that if your company doesn't have a supplier selection process, it's something that you should develop and offer to develop, because your knowledge will be deeper than anybody else's most likely. But developing key suppliers is so important for you. Because keep in mind, when I make a sourcing decision, my first look at that means I'm going to give it to somebody I've already sourced. I don't want to go look for a new supplier every time because in industry, Magna, who does this quite regularly because they bankrupt many suppliers in the process, they say it costs them about $2 million to develop and select a supplier. It's a lot of money every time you want to change a supplier. That's a big number. I don't know if I could justify that, but that's what happens. So I think it's important that you develop a evaluation for key suppliers only, or in point here says critical supplier selection issues, is if you're developing a complex supplier, a complex requirement, complex process, you want to think deeply about that. And remember, we talked in the last class about black box, grey box, white box, with black box being a very complex supplier with the capability of design and development and testing capability. And the white box being a simpler supplier who does a simpler process, who doesn't have the development capability necessarily, and definitely does not have the testing capability. The difference between, if you quote a black box against a white box person on a simple product, the white box will win, primarily because they don't have the overhead structure in place to pay for all this testing that's not required. So you want to make sure that as you select your process, your suppliers, that you only deal with your key suppliers, your critical suppliers, and that may be the top 20%, top 30%, okay? But do it once, do it right, okay? And the other thing you want to try and do is to reduce the supplier evaluation selection time. Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit, because again, if the government takes months, 6 months to evaluate proposals, maybe a year before they select a supplier. But essentially, the government is not a private business, and they don't have private money involved in the business. They have tax money, and they believe they're doing the necessary job to value the taxpayers, but one has to question that when it takes 6 months to make a decision or a year to make a decision. Okay, so those are the things you want to look for. So key suppliers or critical suppliers, you want to make sure you select that. That's how you focus on, and that you have a process-driven function to do this. And that process should be followed every time you look at a key supplier, adding a key supplier, or sourcing. So one is looking for new suppliers, another one is sourcing current product, even within your existing supply base. Okay? So there is no one best way. I like the Honda method. It's very simple. We all can understand it. We know exactly, because there's input from the factory, there's input from design, there's input from quality, there's input from the administration people based on risk. So we see a 360-degree look at our supplier, and we make a decision based on analysis. And sometimes when company A is selected versus A, B, or C, and the analysis says that should be the supplier, sometimes strategy can override that. It says, yes, the evaluation says it should be supplier A, but strategically, we want to source supplier C to develop competition for supplier A. As long as you can have the logic that says, I've done the evaluation, yes, supplier A would look like the best supplier, but we decide as a company to strategically source supplier C because we want to develop competition. Then that's just documented. So somebody picks up your selection document a year from now when you move on and move up in the organization. And why did we select that? Oh, Bailey selected that because it was a strategic decision. And people usually sign that document. My buyer sign it, and when it comes to an evaluation meeting with me to say this is who we think should get it, once I agree with their logic and agree that's the supplier we go, I will sign the document also, because it gives people the place to go back to say, Jim, why did you do this? Or Jim, why was the supplier selected? We like to use them for something else, right? So there's good ways to do it, but there is no one best way. There's probably 100 methods out there that people use. I don't know. I know in the companies I've been with, the Honda process, and I could not duplicate that at Algoma. It's a very specialized industry, but I could not duplicate it because in many cases there is only one supplier who can do the job. The Honda way, Toyota way is very similar, and they do similar processes. So it's a good thing, okay? The overall objective is to reduce your supplier sourcing risk. What is risk? This is the risk of a supplier going bankrupt on you. If a supplier was to be bankrupt and you are not aware he's going bankrupt, they will put a padlock on the door, and you will not be allowed to access your product, your raw materials, your inventory, your equipment until that bankruptcy is cleared, and that's usually done by a receiver who's put in place, an accountant to put in place to help do that, to look after the shareholder value. So the point is that you never want to be at the point where a supplier goes into bankruptcy, because it becomes a nightmare. And in many cases, you have property inside the supplier building because you paid for the raw material, you paid for your work in process, you paid for finished goods, or you will be paying for them, and you want to get them out. And you also have to supply your customer. So it's very important that you minimize the risk and that you maximize the value of to the buyer, and therefore to your customer. And again, price is not an evaluation method. It may be one of your evaluations, but it should not be the only one, or you really have no process. You just take the cheapest price and you go from there. Okay, that's not the right thing to do. So again, doesn't matter when your assignment comes and asks you to develop a process. Doesn't matter if it's better than the next person. There is no best way. As long as it's effective at the end of the day, it's selecting the overall best supplier based on value. Based on value, then you can go from there. Okay, all right. And the other thing you need to do is always view that I'm going to select a supplier once, and he's going to be my supplier forever. Meaning, I don't need to go back and find another supplier to replace the supplier if he does his job and if he continues to support your organization. So we should always look for the long-term gain here, not the short-term quick fix, low price supplier who comes in and offers you some savings. You need to think in long term, what can this supplier do for me in the long term? And that is always the case that we think about. And we have a very good example of that at Honda, because Delphi is General Motors' in-house #1 supplier. It is actually GM company, and they are the #2 supplier worldwide, #3 supplier now worldwide. When we were developing the suspension system for the Acura MDX, we wanted to have a highly interactive electronic system that would keep the car essentially always flat and level, even though you're around the corner at 150, 160 kilometers an hour. And that's called active suspension. Delphi was the only supplier that had that technology developed. And so we looked at Delphi saying, can we use Delphi for other things? And really we couldn't. We already have our supply base. We just wanted this part. And eventually we decided, because it's only one part we want to buy from, and it's a complex part, we would rather develop it ourselves than go into bed with General Motors and Delphi, because I don't want to use Delphi forever. And we decided against Delphi, even though they were the only ones that could do it at the time, or the best ones that could do it at the time. And we recognized the need in the market for another supplier, so we then asked one of our own suppliers to develop that capability, which they did, and eventually we put that into the next model. So sometimes price is not the thing you need to look at. Okay. So supplier selection evaluation, when you think about it, is like your purchasing process, your requisition process. This is a flow, and the one is you recognize the need for a supplier selection, which is a complex part, a high value part, a critical part, a part that you will need, extensive quality control on it, or a process. Every time I say part, it really means part or process, because it could be a service. You could be looking for a supplier to service your truck engines. And therefore it's a service, not a part. But you recognize the need for a supplier selection. Then you as a buyer would then identify, or as the purchasing department or supply chain management department, you would look to say, what are my key sourcing requirements? And again, I've already harped to you many times of the concept of QCDD. That is Honda and Toyota's sourcing criteria. It's got to be quality, it's got to be reasonable cost, the supplier has to have a good delivery history, and they need to be able to develop products in the future for us. Even simple products, we want them the capability to develop products. Anybody can make a part to print. Anybody, any company. When we say make it to print, is I give you a drawing that says make this bracket, and they will measure up and make a tool and make it, and anybody can do that, but that's all they can do. They can't develop the bracket for you. They don't know how to do the material stresses. They don't know how to apply the dynamic vibrations to it. They don't know anything other than I can make a good part, and that will be relatively inexpensive. But if that part was suddenly to break and cause a catastrophic accident, that supplier would have to be able to defend themselves as to how did they select the materials, etc., etc. And they won't be able to, because we had to tell them everything. So we need to determine, what are those key sourcing requirements. And in many cases, there's Q, C, D, D, M for management, and then in that management, we are looking at risk. What is the financial stability of this company? What is their turnover? What is their labor situation? Are they a union operation or non-union? If they are union, are they militant? Meaning, have they had work disruptions in the past? So that's what we mean by identifying sourcing requirements. Then you have to develop your sourcing strategy, or look at your sourcing strategy. And in the Honda document, the sourcing strategy is listed up in the right-hand corner. And it says there that we want to give company A, in this case Finlex, we want to give them 50% of our business. We want to give supplier B and C 25% each. That's our strategy. Therefore, that is in front of us all the time. So in the case that we wanted to and this was for, I believe, a vehicle stability system we were sourcing at that time. So for that type of electronic vehicle stability, crash avoidance, that type of thing, lane avoidance, that's the type of system you're looking at. We will only look at 3 suppliers, and we'll only look at those 3 because they're all capable black box suppliers, and that's the only ones that we want to look at, unless engineering or purchasing comes forward and says, by the way, I happen to find a very good capable supplier in India, for example, that's capable of doing this product at a much more cost-effective rate. So they may say, can you evaluate this supplier at the same time as you're looking at the other 3 to see if there's merit or benefit for us to think about them in the future? So sometimes you will put that 4th or 5th one in there as a exercise in developing your knowledge of them. And then you would look at that again, and then at the end of the day, see how do they line up. So from a QCDD basis on a new supplier, you should ask the question immediately is, how can you determine quality if you've never dealt with them? How do you determine their delivery capability if you've never dealt with them before? Because remember, you as a buyer will receive many discussions and have many discussions with salespeople. Salespeople's job is to convince you that their product or service is the absolute best in the world and that you should use them as a company. And they'll always tell you, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000,000 times, I can make a better product than your current supplier. My answer is always, how do you know who my supplier is? Well, I don't, but I know I can do better, which is a bullshit comment. Right? They don't know that. They're selling something. They're trying to sell you a bill of goods, which may be completely true. They may be good enough to be better than your current supplier, but you need to determine that. But when you're dealing with a new supplier for the very first time, is you can use their own information, and you should ask for evidence of it. What is your delivery performance? What is your current delivery performance to your main customer? Oh no, by the way, I'm going to call your main customer and ask them. What is your quality PPM? What is your development history with them? Like, they need to tell you and convince you they have the capabilities. And every company knows their delivery performance because the customer tells them. You can use their data as the baseline, but you always have to take it with a bit of caution. Okay? And in most cases, I would say, in my world, your existing supplier is who you're actually going to choose. In most cases, we choose our existing supplier because we've already made a commitment to them that if they are good suppliers for us and they will develop product for us and do everything they possibly can to make us competitive, my promise in return is I will give you more business. So I intend to give them more business. Okay, so the 4th point on here says identify potential supplier sources. Again, first of all, most likely they're going to be in-house. So in my case, Honda example, those 3 suppliers are already truly certifiable, preferable suppliers with the same capability. So I know who they were and I can add to that. You also want to limit the suppliers. Of course, your purchasing department can spend months going and looking for many suppliers across the globe. Here's 10 suppliers who can do this job. Do I really want to evaluate 10 suppliers? No, you want to look at those 10 suppliers of buyer and say, now you look at them and tell me who really is the best one in there. Because I've already got 3 good ones. If I'm going to add a 4th one, they've got to be very good, so I don't need 10. So come down to a smaller number to deal with, because you cannot evaluate 10 people. It just takes too much time, too much effort. Okay. You then would determine your method of supplier evaluation and selection. If you have a process like Honda has, our methods are already determined. We already know how to do that, and we do it with each and every key supplier. So in your case, if you join a company, a smaller company, maybe they don't have a method. Maybe they just go for quotes or RFP. And that's fine, because that's a method. But I don't think this is valid to say you need to determine the evaluation and selection. You should have that down pat, whether it is a nuclear reactor for $1.2 billion or whether it is a stamping tool for $100,000. Your process should be your process, should be your process. Yes, in bigger numbers, bigger complex products, you'll take more time, maybe, a deeper understanding of it, but the process should be there. And at the end of the day, you're going to select that supplier and then negotiate and reach an agreement. You already have the price he's asking for, but I will do the final negotiation on maybe on just the supplier we select. If it's clear, then I'll now have my buyers do a cost-based negotiation that says, we think the value of this product's $100, you're asking for $110, we need to try and eliminate the gap, and we work together to do that. And that's, again, the beauty of a cross-functional team we talked about in the last class. Cross-functional team can help you do that, because me as a purchaser sees things different from Bob, the engineer, or Mary, the quality engineer. They see things different than I do, from a different viewpoint, and their opinion is valued as we negotiate price and also select supplier. And at Honda, the final decision is made by the 4 key people: purchasing, manufacturing, quality, and development. The 4 of us make the decision. Purchasing does not have any more power than they do, because ultimately we have to agree as a company this is what we want. All right. So this process, and again, you don't need to memorize this. I won't ask you to give me this process, but it's really not so difficult when you look at it. It's pretty common sense. But you just get through this process and decide what are you doing, and it makes it easier if you have indeed a supplier selection process. Okay. When would you want to make selection decisions? And one is, if you're developing a new product, is your biggest time when you say, I need to look for either new suppliers or evaluate my current supply base if they can make this new product. A new level cell phone, the Galaxy S10s, is not a new product, because they already have the Galaxy 7, they already have the Galaxies 5 and 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever it might be. There's already a product there, so it's an existing product, although maybe a new product launch, that's different. But for a new product development means we're going to start from scratch and develop a new idea. And that's where you might have your biggest challenge, as to who inside my supply base can do this. And if I don't have someone who can make this new product, then I have to go looking for someone. Okay. Another reason you may determine a new supplier is required due to performance. Their quality and delivery performance is not acceptable and is continuing to cause you headaches in the manufacturing floor or in the service department that says, I can't rely on this supplier to make my product because he's got poor quality and he's got poor delivery and he's also cost me money. The other reason you might do that is if you have a monopoly. And Delphi would be a monopoly on the part I talked about. But in a monopoly, I don't like monopolies, because I've given the negotiation power to the supplier. I always want to have the power to make decisions. The buyer should be the power broker, not the supplier. And if you have a monopoly, you need to find a second supplier, somebody capable of replacing your supplier, because if so, then you have no strong ability to negotiate. And Borg Warner in North America is that type of supplier. Borg Warner, you won't know, but the VW out of South Carolina, are one of the best manufacturing suppliers in the world. They have the best quality history, the best delivery history, and they're the most expensive. But they build every 4x4 drive system in North America for every vehicle, from Mercedes to BMWs to Hondas to Jeep to anybody that's got a 4x4 in the system. It is most likely that that 4x4 system is made by BorgWarner. And they were for us initially, and we tried to get a more cost competitive solution out there, and Borg essentially told us, nope, this is what we do, this is what we cost. I'm sure you can appreciate the value we're giving for you, and it's end of discussion. When we wanted to develop a four-wheel drive system and do something different with it, BorgWarner was not prepared to do that. So therefore we agreed quietly that we will continue to use BorgWarner until our development engineers at Honda in Japan could develop a four-wheel drive system. We told Borg that we had no choice, we're going to do this. We were upfront about it, but that we had sourced them with quite a bit of business. But still, we decided to do it, and we did that, and that became what you see on Acura is now called the Super All-Wheel Drive on their Acura line, and that is Honda's own four-wheel drive system that no longer uses BorgWarner. They're a great supplier, but we no longer use them for Acura level vehicles now because we have our own system. We still use them for truck and for pilot, so we can do that. But it's important that you know. So look at your existing suppliers. You know, if you have a 5-year contract with a supplier and you're coming to the end of the contract, maybe you look for a new supplier. Again, look inside first and then go outside. But 9 out of 10 times, the existing supplier is going to be your choice again because they have now got 5 years of knowledge building based on your contract. Okay, if you're buying new equipment, Amazon, for example, when they built their conveyor system, they most likely looked at a supplier to do that who had the capability of not only giving you moving conveyors, but also the ability to program them and interface them with the current operations. So they were probably looking for a new supplier or an existing supplier, potentially. Okay, so these are reasons why you might go looking for a supplier. All of them very valid, all of them complex, and none of them chicken shit, meaning none of the, haven't talked about office supplies, we haven't talked about cleaning supplies, we haven't talked about even safety supplies. What we have talked about is complex, high-value products or services that you need to make good decisions on. And that is why you as a buying organization need to do the right job to give the right direction to the company so that quality and delivery and development personnel will agree with your selection and we'll all agree and go forward. Okay? All right, so that's very important for you. Performing market tests. No, I disagree with that comment. When you're performing market tests, you're not looking for a new supplier. You're testing the market from a simple, and you want to make this a simple process that says, test my market to see if my suppliers are competitive. Therefore, you go to the marketplace and test based on QCDD again, because ultimately, if you only look at cost, you do not get a good situation. Facing counter trade requirements. What is counter trade? It means if I buy a part from, let's say, Thailand, I am required to sell my product to Thailand as well. So counter trade means reverse action that it becomes mandatory. If you buy from me, then I get to buy from you. And that's sometimes not a good thing. Outsourcing analysis is probably one of the outsourcing means that you currently make the part or do the service in-house, and you're deciding in order to make it streamlined and more efficient and effective, you're going to outsource it. And you have to be able to justify to your company that they should go outside. So manufacturing will come to you and say, I need floor space in my plant. Right now I've got 4 machines doing this job. I'd like you to outsource that to a supplier so that I can get that space for something else. So therefore you would then compare your outside source to your internal source. So that you're still going to make a decision because you need the space, but you have to have a reason for saying you should go outside, because the union may object to that. Consolidating volumes. in OPM 600 we will talk about two key concepts called rationalization and optimization. Rationalization is taking your 10 current suppliers and rationalizing down to 3 or 2. In order to do that, you would have to evaluate all those 10 suppliers as to who you should keep. Okay. Reverse auctions I don't agree with. It's there. It's where you put a part on the internet and said, what am I bid? Who's going to bid for this part? This is its function. This is what it is. It's probably a simple part. And the reverse auction starts at $10, $10. Then before you know it, somebody's down at $5 and they get the business. It's reverse auctioning. Okay, and reducing the size of the supply base. The more suppliers you have, the more administrative headache you have, the more money it costs you. You want to be able to rationalize that supply base down to a reasonable number and then give more volume to your suppliers. So those are reasons why you would do that. Okay, identify key sourcing requirements. Look at this. I didn't make this one up. Supplier quality, cost, delivery, and other. Okay. And this is determined by either your customer, who you're selling to, or your internal customers, which are their design department or your quality department. This is not my slide. I didn't make this up. This is Q, C, D, and D. All right. So when I asked you to think of things on Q, C, D, D, and by the way, on your midterm, the two short answers, I think the average score so far is 3 out of 5 because of goodness in my heart. And only so far, I've looked at all of the short answers, and I believe only 2 people referenced QCDD and answered the question based on QCDD. And they did very well on it because it gave them a viewpoint to answer from, and they did it. So when I say to you, write QCDD in your margin and answer your question based on that, you don't have to answer it based on that, but it gives you 4 different viewpoints you can think about in order to make an answer. So here again, this textbook is also saying QCD is important, not just C, not just cost or price. But please, and it will vary. Okay. Sourcing strategies. Do you want a single source or multiple sourcing? You want short-term, long-term, design versus operational support. All these things, full service versus non-full service, domestic versus foreign. All of those are strategic decisions because they all have leading implications, significant implications. The last one is maybe most important. Do I want a collaboration or an arm's length relationship? An arm's length relationship would be the traditional style. Tell your supplier, give them minimum information, negotiate the price, keep them at a distance, as opposed to a collaborative supplier as a supplier you bring towards you, bring them close to your chest. That, you have to imagine the whole idea of an arm's length is you hold someone out, you hold someone back. When you're not arm's length, it's not illegal. It just means you have a closer relationship with that person, that it's not just based on price. So when you want to develop complex products, collaboration is a key. And in many cases, if you can put the key supplier onto your cross-functional team, you take that to a much higher level. Not everyone can do that. In fact, most people can't do that because they don't trust the supplier to that degree. Honda and Toyota, we clearly bring our suppliers into our cross-functional teams because once we select them, we want to use their knowledge and their consideration, their ability to design a product for us. So strategy trumps price. Strategy trumps, and when I say trumps, it's a card game of euchre or something else. It means that it holds power over. Strategy should always be, this is what we're trying to meet. And if you can't make your strategy, then you should declare on your document why you're not following your strategic direction. Because you can't just change your mind every time you don't like the result. And that's really what the process does for you. It kind of ties your hands to say, this is how we make our decisions, this is how you're going to make the decision, and if you don't follow this process, you have to declare why you didn't use the process, or why you didn't choose multiple sourcing. So for example, I've already said I don't like monopolies. That is a single supplier. They control your business, they control that part function. I don't like that. Never have. I just don't like it. So, but now, you know, when you look at this, collaboration is very important. These are strategies, and they should be taken into account, and you should decide up front what you're going to do. A full service versus a non-full service supplier, you can't compare them. One is full service, which means he will pump your gas, he'll change your oil, he's going to do your mechanics, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. As opposed to compare the cost of that service for your car against the Speedy Lube. All they do is lube. And you drive in and they lube your car in 15 minutes, and you drive out and it costs you $80. It will cost you more when you go to your mechanic because he has more capability and more full service. So domestic versus foreign, domestic always means in the country you belong. In China, Chinese suppliers to Chinese manufacturers are called domestic. In North America, anybody based in North America becomes domestic to us, even though they may be Japanese based or Chinese based. They're still considered domestic when they manufacture in your home country. As before, any questions that you've got, please don't hesitate to ask them. Okay. This is not a lot of slides in this process because it's only 40 slides, so they're very clear, they're easy to follow, and the biggest examples may be when you do your own assignment. Okay. Identifying potential. So if you've got a question, please shout it out because I can't see your little block that you're there, so I can't see when you're asking a question. So please ask it. So identify potential sources, right? So how well can existing suppliers satisfy your QCD requirements? That is the first thing you should always do, because your first choice should be unequivocally always a current supplier if they can do it. Always give it to your current supplier if they can do it, unless for some strategic reason that you want to do something different. And so when I look at that, I am very cautious, and when I take a supplier in, I promise them with my heart that I will grow their business as I grow. I can only do that by giving them more product, more opportunity, more models, more phones to make for me, more this, more that. And every time I get a new supplier, I diminish their value by giving them some of their business. So always go to your existing supply base first. If they can't do it, then go outside and look for someone. But always give your existing suppliers that first opportunity. Okay. Strategic importance of a purchase. Yes, if it's strategic, then if it's technically complex, yeah, that's when you have to look at that. You have to then say, is my current supply base? But in the 2 points here, strategically and technically, when I look at something, I'm still coming back to say, how does this meet my existing supply base? This is what I want to do. This may help direct me, but I will look at my supply base and I will fight against my buyers if they come to say, no, I just want to try a new supplier. We're not in the business of trying new suppliers. We're in the business of helping grow our current suppliers because we promised we would. Yeah, but what if this company can do better? Prove it to me. And even then, the answer is going to be most likely no, because I'm happy with my current supply base. Because everybody thinks that they have a different answer. Every supplier out there will tell you they can do a better job. Your existing supply base, if you select them properly, should be your go-to places almost every time. Okay? You don't need to do that. You can look at this as if it's high importance to the buyer. All this is saying is you line up your low strategic value, low capability. You look for major search information, minor search. Like again, you don't need to remember this. I don't have to memorize this. You can say that if it's high strategic and high capability, it's minor to, and in fact, I actually think this slide is wrong. So if it's of high strategic importance and the high capability, we're talking about high capability of suppliers, you're going to minor to moderate information search. Most likely, this is if you're looking for new suppliers, I think. Most likely you're going to go in-house. You already got that. Low importance to the buyer is minor to high capability. I actually don't think, because this is saying that this one here is high strategic value and low capability of a supplier. Then you're looking for major information. That is correct, because you've got high strategic value and your current suppliers are not very good, therefore I have to find them. So there's a major look there. That just helps you decide that. That's all. Okay. All right. Sources of information. There is the most likely, and remember this book was started probably 15 years ago. when the first volume came out. A lot of these, even though it's obviously today, your internet sources, your internet searches, internet is the biggest, fastest, most powerful thing you've got today at your fingertips. You can find anything on there. And by the way, Amazon in a lot of cases is becoming suppliers of choice because they can supply a product and stand behind it, by the way, but usually not complex systems. So we found a lot of, we thought, obsolete parts for our ships on Amazon or Alibaba or someplace else. But keep in mind is those companies are not development capability. They don't have that. And if you have to then be willing to give up to Amazon your responsibility for quality. They are not going to come to your door when you've got a failure in the field. Not going to happen. Trade shows, trade journals, information, these are all still things that happen. This is now the priority. Internet is the first place you're going. You will get salespeople calling all the time, still doing the same thing, promising you the moon. You have to then decide it. But here's this word preferred supplier, by the way, and it came up in your midterm, and half the class got it wrong. They have no idea what a preferred supplier is. It means preferred. It means that we prefer to use them over other suppliers. They are not to say they are current suppliers, but a preferred supplier says out of my 100 suppliers, I've got 10 preferred, which means they are higher in a higher classification than the other 90, and that is your preferred go-to suppliers for complex products. That is what preferred means, is we've designated them as a special supplier, and that we will always use them unless someone tells you otherwise. Okay, so that's what preferred supplier is. Sourcing alternatives. Do you buy directly from the manufacturer, or do you buy from a distributor? Princess Auto is a distributor of auto parts. When I go to buy a control arm for my car, a steering arm for my car, it will cost me $200 at Princess Auto. If I buy that same control arm from the manufacturer, from the person who made the control arm, I will pay $50. So it depends on what size you are, what you're trying to do, how much volume you're going to use. And usually volume dictates whether you're going to the manufacturer or when you're going to distributor. And the thing you have to be cautious with the distributor is they have this product available, and they can buy that product from 10 different sources, and they'll base their purchasing power on price, most likely. Which means that you could be buying the same part from a different supplier one week to the other, and you could get a lesser level of quality because Princess Auto has sourced a cheaper source. So sometimes you have to be very careful of that. You cannot control the distributor. You cannot control where he buys from. You cannot control what's on his shelf. So be very careful on a distributor. Okay. The concept inside the distributor is vendor managed inventory. We've seen vendor managed inventory in display at Amazon when you've seen the vending machines for the safety equipment. So the way that works is the safety company, whoever they use for their safety, has got a commitment with Amazon to come in and restock those machines every day whenever they need to be done. Okay? And what that means is the inventory inside the vending machine actually belongs to the vendor, belongs to a supplier, and he only gets paid for it when the person at Amazon puts in his card and takes out the safety equipment. And then the system will record Jim Phillips got another pair of safety glasses, and therefore on my invoice from the supplier will be Jim Phillips, one pair of safety glasses, and they replenish them accordingly. It means the supplier manages the inventory and they have access to your plant, come in and keep filling things up. And a Coca-Cola machine, a pop machine is another example. The inventory inside the pop machine belongs to the person who owns the pop machine. It doesn't belong to you as a company. It only belongs to you when you put in your dollar to get a can of pop out. Okay, so that's your simplest example of vendor managed is snack machines and pop machines belong to someone outside of the company, and they come in and stock them up when they need be, and they take the money out, and you only take possession of the product when you pay for it. Okay, so that's your vendor managed. Integrated supply is exactly what we're talking about, complex suppliers who are integrated with us. We talked about integration, that they are embedded in our process. They will continue to give us the same product. It means they're integrated to your company. Local, national, and international suppliers. Yes, you can look at your local person who has the small shop down the street. His price cannot be the same as a national distributor, an Acklands Granger, for example, because Acklands buying volume. So, but you may choose to use the local supplier because I like local business. And at Honda, we try to use all local subcontractors for service and for MRO supplies because it's not a lot of money, and we're building good value and goodwill with our local suppliers in the community where we have a plant. It's one of our strategies. You know, Acklands can do better. Absolutely they can, but they're not in my local facility. They're out of Toronto, and my plant's in Alliston. We're a small town of 10,000 people. Everything we buy locally helps the economy where we build our parts. Okay. International suppliers can or may not be cheaper than national. And the thing you have to be careful on international suppliers is the price of the product is not the price it costs you to get the product. So you almost, if I'm going to compare an international supplier to a North American supplier, local supplier, you have to price it as landed at your facility, which means if I buy a part for $100 locally and I have a Chinese alternative to sell it to me for $60, one would say that's a much better price. 60 versus 100, that's 40% less, so I should buy from China. Trouble is, I need to get it from China to here, and that's about 35 to 40% of the cost. Okay, so there's a reason that you have to make sure you're comparing apple to apple, which means FOB my plant, in my plant, landed here so I can put my hands on it, because all the other costs are there. You just don't see them right away. And so you may buy that part for $60 from China, and by the time you get it in your hands at your plant, maybe $95 or $90, still 10% less, but an awful lot of work to do it and a lot of inventory in a pipeline if you're buying parts on a regular basis from overseas. So please think about that. It is your final cost in your hands at your facility is what you should think about. Okay. Multiple versus single sourcing, always a sourcing alternative, but and you got to be careful, because if you're sourcing one part, and when you talk multiple versus single sourcing, if you're talking one part, then you have to build a tool for that part. Most likely you're going to buy it from a single source. How you create competition is you take a like part from another vehicle, another product line, and you give it to the competition, which means they don't make the same part, but they're making similar parts, therefore they're comparable. Because if you dual source, triple source a single part, you're now buying 3 sets of tools, and you're now building up assets in another factory or another facility that you have to pay for. Okay? There you do have to pay for tools, either as part of the piece price or as upfront cost. But single sourcing means you have one set of tools from one supplier and you buy that product from them. That is not a monopoly. A monopoly is when the only supplier can make that type of product and no one else can, or no one else does. That's a monopoly. So be careful with multiple versus single sourcing, and Honda always multiple sources, because we have got multiple vehicles and the similar parts can go on other cars. Therefore we have 2 to 3 capable suppliers that in a heartbeat I can take my tools from company A and put them inside company B, and company B can run them and make them. Okay, so it's not good to be single source. It is not good. I don't like it. I never like it, and I always try to find some reason not to. Except in the marine industry where I came from, there was a lot of single sources because only one supplier can do it. Okay. Financial risk analysis. Please realize that this is becoming a very clear differentiating point, because of the economy is not in great shape and suppliers are not in great shape because the customers are very aggressive in pricing, is that you have to have a financial risk tool in place that checks your suppliers' risk. Now you can only check public companies. You cannot check private companies because it's private and their information is not available. Most of us, larger companies, use Dun& Brad. Dun & Brad is a New York financial company that checks on the financial stability of many, all public suppliers in North America. It costs us money to use Dun & Brad, but what Dun & Brad does for us is they have all of our supply base, public suppliers, in their database, and they can constantly monitor 2 or 3 10 different financial monitors. And then when one goes to risk or starts to show a risk, they will notify us as a customer that says, your supplier ABC is now increasing their days to payment from 30 days to 120 days, which is a clear indication of a financial distress situation. They call them early indicators, leading indicators, and we look at those early leading indicators, and Dun & Brad does it for us. But they look at that to give me the warning, you should have a look at company ABC because they are showing the signs of distressed financial situation. They tell you 6 months ahead of time, it's there, go look at it, and we will go and look at it, and we'll determine whether the supplier is in financial distress and what do we need to do to help it. Okay. Most companies do not advertise they're going out of business. Most companies don't advertise until it's too late, till you hear Eaton's has closed their doors. Eaton's have declared bankruptcy today. And once that's announced in the news, it's already done. It was done the night before. You have no access to your product. We always want to know when your suppliers are going to close doors or a strike, by the way, is another thing you should be watching, is another leading indicator. If you're dealing with a company that's got a union contract, it's a 3-year contract, for 2 years you don't have to worry about it. But on that 3rd year, you need to start to think about his contract is up in July 1st. Therefore, I need to be prepared for a labor disruption. And we've seen that with General Motors and the CAW, the UAW. General Motors have been on strike for 6 weeks now because they did not agree. Their contract is up with GM, and the UAW's contract is up with GM, and they did not get an agreement. Therefore, they went on strike. Okay. Now I did see, so that strike has been settled just last weekend, I believe it was. It's been ratified by the General Motors workers, so they will now go back to work. But the same UAW controls Ford and Chrysler Fiat Chrysler. Same UAW, CAW union controls Ford and Fiat Chrysler. So now the way that works is that the UAW picks one customer to negotiate with, and based on their results with that, they will use that as the baseline for Ford and Chrysler Fiat. Fiat Chrysler. Same one. So if Fiat Chrysler doesn't agree with it, then they'll be on strike next. But essentially, the UAW is smart. They'll make one contract, and then they'll just tweak the contract, little bits here and there, depend on local issues or something else. But essentially, they will get the similar deal with both those major customers. Now, you'll notice I don't mention Toyota and I don't mention Honda because they are non-union facilities. But both those companies will watch these negotiations very carefully because at the end of the day, they will adjust their pay scale to be similar to General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. Because if they don't, then there's a possibility that they will be unionized also. So be very carefully. We would prefer a non-union workforce. They're more flexible than a union workforce, but we also have to be very careful to watch the General Motors situation, because if they suddenly pay people $10 an hour more, then we know that we have to do something also. So you have the financial risk situation or contract renewal situation in play right now with General Motors, and it's cost them 6 weeks of strike. And that may be good for General Motors because they could have been sitting with excess inventory anyway, and they're saying, I'd like to get rid of my inventory, so if they take us on strike, that's okay, because it allows us to get rid of our inventory. So sometimes it's good to have a strike. Trouble is you just don't know how long it will be. So keep that in mind. If you've got a limited supplier pool, labor disruption is a big part of it. You got to think about that. Okay. Methods of evaluation for supplier providing information. That's when you don't know anything about your supplier. You don't know, you've never dealt with them directly. I can't tell you them from Adam to Eve. You then use their supplier information, but you should go to the supplier. You should always visit the facility. You should always see them face to face. You should walk their floor. You can gauge, and again, I'm using Amazon as your example. You all walked through Amazon 4 weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago. You walked through Amazon and you all came to the same conclusion that people here are not very happy. Almost everybody noticed that. They're not very friendly, not very happy. There's no smiling faces. You would never know that unless you are walking their plant floor using your eyes to observe what you're seeing. And therefore, when you are evaluating a supplier and you're down to 3 suppliers, and you should visit those 3 suppliers and spend time understanding what they do, how they do it. Look at their data they've got posted for the performance, their on-time delivery, the performance, their quality, etc., etc. Because all of that will be there. You have to hold on a second for me. I've got somebody coming to my door, so let me take a 2-minute break if I can, please. Stay with me, I'll be right back. I don't think you can down from here, but you can definitely. Okay. All right, be careful. All right, thank you. Sorry, I had a contractor who needs to walk across my property to get to another house, and he was asking permission. So, come back to supplier visits. Very important you do it. As a buyer, you should always find time to go to your supplier, to build a face-to-face relationship, have lunch with them, talk to the people on the floor, because most suppliers love having a customer there, because they can tell the people this is Ford or Chrysler, Honda's coming to see us today. They clean up their plant, they make everything looking wonderful, they try to give you a dog and pony show about how good they are, but it's good to do it because you can find a significant amount of information that's not necessarily available to you public-wise. So when you're doing that, that's when you look at if you don't know the supplier, they will always give you a good visit, a good tour. They'll tell you what they want you to see. What's important for you to do is to respect what they show you, but to use your brains and use your eyes to see everything else round about you. Because they're showing me this work cell in front of me, here's a very nice work cell that we use. While you're looking at that work cell, just have a look around you, 180 degrees, and see if this what you're looking at is consistent across the plant. Is this one-off? Is it the only cell that looks like this and the rest look like shit? You need to look around and use your eyes. When I graduated from Honda's top management school, they taught us to use the power of observation as opposed to the power of analysis. But initially, your gut feel and your eyes can tell you many, many things. You may go back and study the facts more deeply later, or later in the day if you want, but your eyes will tell you what you're seeing, and if you don't like it, what you see, there's probably a good reason why you don't like it, although you can't maybe put your finger on it. So it's important that you visit the supplier, you see the condition, and you get a mental image of what company ABC looks like, because when you go to see them next year, to maybe do an annual performance appraisal with them, tell them how the business is going, they'll want to come to your house every time. You should almost insist on going to their house every second time, because you want to see the changes. Okay? You would notice if you were selecting Amazon supplier, their people were not very happy. That might have led a discussion point as to why are your people not happy? What is your turnover? Are you going through people constantly? And one of the students mentioned that is most likely they've got high turnover because they're always hiring. They're not growing. Hold on, please. Jim Phillips. Yes, Bob. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Sorry, it's another contractor. So what's important for us is that you use your eyes and that you decide and you document your visit, because you can see many, many things. And again, you're using preferred suppliers. For the most part, you should know who they are, okay? And sometimes you'll use third-party or external information. That's the last resort for me. You should always see by yourself. I insist my buyers go to the plant. I want them to go, touch, feel, smell, understand what the supplier condition is like, build a relationship with the people there so you know them face to face. Okay? Evaluation criteria: price, quality, delivery, cost, QCDD, management capability, employee capability. All these things are things you can consider as you build your assignment. When you build your tool to evaluate your supply base. All of these are valid, every one of them. What is your employee's capability? And I come back to, I told you, BorgWarner is the best supplier, I think, in the world, capability-wise, quality-wise. Cost, no, but definitely from a quality and delivery, 100% performance, zero defects in 15 years working with them, zero, not one. But in your management capability, employee capability, all of that are good. When you look at these things, I can tell you now, BorgWarner, other than price, BorgWarner probably is top class in every one of these things. And if you want a top-class company, a first-class company, best-in-class company, they would have these things, which means they have systems, they have a philosophy, they have a good philosophy, they have got an employee sharing process, they've got they look after people, they're non-union, they've got happy workers, they've got workers with low turnover, they've got workers who are highly skilled, even if it's not a skilled trade. But I'll give you an example. At Chrysler Windsor, I went to visit them. Chrysler, and on their assembly line, and the workers in the assembly plant know 4 processes. This is what I do it every day, the same process every day of my life. Same as you do at Amazon, and it makes for people pretty boring. At Honda, our same operator knows 64 processes, so we can move them around. Okay, you want to put yourself on mute there? But very clearly, that this slide here is important for you to realize. This is how you evaluate a supplier. These things are all important. They're important for us because they can hurt you in the future. Okay, and you can read up on in detail on your chart what some of these are. Okay. Environmental regulation compliance. Do you need to worry about that? Are they environmentally sound? If, for example, they're making chemicals, they're going to have a lot more stringent products, process controls than someone who doesn't make chemicals. What do they do with their oily water? Do they dump it down the drain, or do they put it through a processing system? More and more environmental regulations is coming into play. That's going to be more important for you, and you're starting to see that now in China, and that is why the price of products in China are starting to increase, because they're putting environmental regulations on to most factories, and it adds cost. But you should know that if your product has got environmental issues, then you need to ensure the safekeeping of that product at your supplier. Even though the ultimate it's their responsibility, if it's your product, you are ultimately responsible. So environmentally, it's becoming more and more important for you to do. Financial stability we talked about. Somebody who's not financially stable cannot attract the best talent. They cannot pay the best wages. They cannot have the best quality. Because when people are disgruntled, people are unhappy, and they're leaving the job, it means there's a constant turnover, which means your quality goes for shit. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Are they e-commerce capable? One would say today everybody's e-commerce capable. In truth, not everyone is, but 99% of the world is. You get the odd one. And I choose to use a supplier who is very good at what he does. He does a special job for me. He is completely not capable, e-commerce capable. In fact, he just started to send emails out this last month. Let me take another phone call. Hold on, please. Jim Phillips. Yes, Peter, the hot top people just called, and they'll be here in half an hour. All right? Okay, see you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye. That's okay. All right. Sorry, guys, but my hot tub's going in today, and both the electrician and the hot tub people are coming. So, in the next 15 minutes, so we'll stop a little bit early. E-commerce capability, long-term supplier relations, long-term relationship potential. If you don't have a long-term relationship potential, you need to think twice about why are you sourcing them in the first place unless you absolutely have to. Short term is not your game, is not where you want to be, and it will cost you money, much more money in the long run. If you cannot see a long-term relationship, you need to reconsider your decision and find a supplier who you can then have a long-term relationship. Yes, there are exceptions, but long-term relationship in a contemporary type environment is proven time and time again to be much more effective than a short-term relationship in a traditional one, a traditional organization. And if your organization that you join happens to be traditional, still you can still do long-term supplier relationships. You can still do that in a traditional model as opposed to changing your supplier every year unless it's a general commodity. So these last two slides are very good for you. It's important that you understand supplier selection includes all of these things. There's not a bad comment in here so far, but all of them mean something when it comes to picking the right supplier, the best supplier. And I do not want to have to do my work again next year. I've just done this today. I don't want to have to find another supplier when I could have made a better decision. Okay? There's cost to do that. There's frustration. There's chaos when it happens, when a supplier suddenly goes out of business. And there's a lot of scrambling that has to happen. And you jeopardize your customer every time it happens. Okay? I happened to work for TRW in my younger days. They were a union facility, and they had the ability to tell the customer they had never had a work stoppage, never had a strike, and therefore customers like that because they want continuity of supply. And then they had a wildcat strike one night. One night, the midnight shift walked off the job, and we no longer could tell our customer that we had never had a labour disruption. With our biggest customer, when they found out that we had a strike, short-term strike, only 8 hours, and it was done for effect by the union, we lost, over the next 5 years, we lost 25% of our business because they no longer could guarantee continuity of supply. It's very important that you think about the same thing. If a company's had a labour dispute, they will have another one, most likely. It means that the people that are working there are unhappy with the current situation. And labour disruptions means you can't get your product out either because you cannot cross a picket line, or you should not cross a picket line. We all do, and the management team as a manager, I am obligated to cross that picket line. But you can't ship product, you can't make product, you need to have inventory in place for that. And that's, by the way, when we talk about when you see a contract coming up for renewal, the GM situation, most likely GM prepared for this by building excess inventory to have just in case there was a strike. So they were prepared for it. And you also, if you have a contract coming up with one of your key suppliers and they have a labour contract coming up, you should know that, and you should prepare in advance, increasing your inventory over the 1 to 2 months ahead of time, so that should there be a strike, you are okay and you can continue to supply your product. Very important. Okay. Let me stop there. And what I want you to do is I want to show you. We talked about several students have talked about the hold on a second. Your blogs and how I rate them. And what I'd like to do is change to Excel for you just so you can see it. I can't show you. I'll show you how it works, but I can't show you the detail because that is confidential. Let me just change my screen for you. What should happen, what you should see coming on your screen in about 30 seconds, 10 seconds, depending how fast your computer is, what you should see is a spreadsheet called Discussion Board to the Amazon Fulfillment Center. Can someone tell me when you can see it?
I can see it.
Okay, all right, thanks, Sam. Right, so when you look at that, this is how I create a mark for your discussion board. You'll notice that there's a criteria across the top called activity, strength of comment, comments in, comments out, the Amazon supply chain, some adjustment, and that adjustment's for my good heart that says, yeah, I know that Izzy's a good student and this is a shitty job and maybe he should get an extra mark, but I won't do that. But sometimes I have to put an adjustment in there, and I don't usually, but it's there just in case. But at the end of the day, the evaluation is worth 20 points, not 10. 10 is for the supply chain mini assignment, and 10 is for your activity and your observation, etc. What you will notice, your comment is the strongest. That's the strongest value because I want you to give me a good comment, and I will rate that between 1 and 5. Okay, and I think if I look at, see, I can see the note that says 5 is very good, it's in-depth comment, 3 is average, 1 is low effect. Okay, I've set criteria in here. Okay, in comments in, if there is 3 to 5 comments in, you get 2 points because comments in means that people are interested in what you're saying. If there's only 1 or 2 comments, you get a point. If you get no comments, you get 0. So you're trying to, this comment here goes in here. The comments out means how many comments do you make on other people's blogs, and are those comments valued? And so again, I looked there at when you make 3 to 5 comments, is worth 2 points. If you look in 1 to 2 comments, is worth 1 point, and if you don't make any comments, it's worth nothing. So these, and then your supply chain here is different. So in this particular case, what I've posted to Blackboard should be this score here, 17 overall and 85 in this example. Okay, you should look at that, and if you don't agree with that score, you don't see this detail, unfortunately, because inside this screen here is your detail. And unless you want me to show everybody the good ones and the bad ones, I can't just show just one, and that's why down here I can pull something and do one. Okay, in fact I should insert there. Okay.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Like, I understand you want dialogue and you want people posting on your topic, but even if you make a good post and people just choose not to reply, it's just hard for me to see like why you would lose points because of that.
So why did you make 3 comments on yours? You made 3 comments out. Why did you do that?
I did that because I wanted to involve everybody and get the discussion going.
Or was there something in the comment that the student made that made you make a comment? If there was nothing of value,
Right,
no comment to make. So that's the point of the comment is you have to make comments, and you can control what comes in. That's why it's only a low value. But everyone's got the same criteria. Everyone has the same
for
criteria.
example, like I wrote a long paragraph or whatever, and it was pretty in detail. There was a lot of stuff people could have commented on, and you were the only one that commented on it.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
But I can't help that. So the point is this:
Right.
is I will value your comments in and out, and when in and out happens, you get points for it. If they don't make comments on you, it doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt you.
It does though, because it's worth 2 marks if they don't
Well, that's
comment.
true. But this is worth a chicken shit mark on your overall scheme of things. You're talking like a 0.1% if someone doesn't make a comment. It's immaterial. I'm not asking you to make comments on everyone. I'm saying if you're interested in what you're doing, the whole purpose of a dialogue is dialogue back and forth. You can choose to do it or not. If you do, you get benefit from it. Okay, if you have a good comment, and your comment may be detailed, but maybe it was too detailed, and maybe somebody looked at your whole page and says, shit, I'm not going to read that. So maybe your error, Simon, was bad because it was a good comment, but maybe it was too long that people just didn't have the time to read it all. Whereas somebody else might have made half of that, and it said the same information, and they get 5 comments because it was readable, it was something interesting in it, etc., etc. And writing style makes a difference, because if someone writes a big paragraph the length of your screen and it doesn't put any punctuation in, it doesn't break up the paragraphs, doesn't break up the points, I personally, I read it because I have to, but if I see something to come to me like that, I very seldom read it personally, because it's very difficult to read when it's all hammered together in one place. So in order to elicit comments, it's got to be interesting. You've got to say something of value, and it's got to be of a reasonable length so that people don't feel burdened by it. And it's not your case. You did a long one, but I will continue to evaluate comments in, and you have to then continue. And if at the end of the day, 2 points out of 20 is nothing, because this is only worth 10% of your overall mark, or whatever it is. So it's 10% of 10%, so it's just not even there.
I have a question.
So you have to live with it, and you have to continue to work for it. Okay. Next.
I had a question.
Yes.
So did you mark this Amazon discussion already, right?
Yes.
So when I go on my Blackboard, I see the whole overall discussion accumulation. So I don't exactly know how much I got from Amazon.
Right. So what happened is what happened to 3 suppliers asked me that last night, and Saman being one of them. That's why he has a good question and he's valid what he says. They asked for their personal example, and so what I will do, if you really want to see that, I will send you a copy of your line with this heading so that you can see exactly what you got. What I can't do, guys, is you have to remember this, is there's 22 students. If it's a mark you can't understand, we should definitely, I can show you, but I've got to show you individually. I cannot show you, just send you the spreadsheet. That's the easiest thing. I can just send the spreadsheet out and say, here's the marks. And then you'll see everybody's marks, and you'll see the high ones and the low ones, and it's not fair to the people who may be struggling. So that's why it has to be individually. So what I did for last night for a couple of students, I sent them an excerpt of this, being this portion here, and then their results underneath it. And I did that so that they can see how I got the marks. So gladly, anybody wants to know, just send me an email saying, I'd like to see my detail, and I'll send it to you. But understand this will change again, because this happens to be the Amazon one. When you look at, I can't show you that, because there's a master one here, and I won't show you, but the master one just shows the individual numbers of what happens. But there is a detail there. I have to make sure I can't show you without. But if you want to see yours, I'll send it to you. But it will be only yours, and it's a bit of a headache, but it's necessary. So anybody that wants to know your overall and your individual ones, I'll send it to you, because there's 2 on here. There's the traditional one, there's a traditional versus contemporary, and there's the Amazon. So the master one keeps both of them and keeps that running total. The same happens on your quizzes. Again, I blacked it out, but on your quiz summary, there's quiz 1, 2, 3. They're worth 10, 10, and 10 for a total of 30. And therefore, Grade Center would say, I'm accumulating them as I go along. And I change your Grade Center valuation. Initially, I put it was worth 10, and your 10 showed up. Then when I did the second one, it became 20. And so Grade Center should show this 90% mark, for example, in this example, out of 3 quizzes, which are 30 marks. This particular student has, which is a dummy student, an example only, is 27, you get 90%. That's what this mark is what shows up in your Grade Center. Now the difference is I can send you back your quizzes, which I do. I send you back your quizzes with the correct answer because they're individual documents and I don't need to share the whole summary. Whereas I can't just share your comment on a discussion board or a blog just for you because it's open forum. So that's why I have to do, and it's a pain in my ass for me, but it's important that you get the best mark you can, and that's why I try to do that. So I can provide this information for you. I will, and on your next blog, which will come out probably by tomorrow, which will be tell me what I'd like you to discuss what you saw at the Toyota plant tour. And again, the people who don't go to these things, that's unfortunate because they're valuable exercises and they're worth marks for us in the sense that you should be able to apply that knowledge to answering your questions, etc. So that'll be the blog, and if 10 students didn't go, then I'll have to give them something else for that same 10 marks. I can't just give it to the people who went, but it's important that you reflect on what you did at Toyota. I heard it was a very good tour. I was supposed to go there and I forgot, quite honestly. I was sitting here at 9:45 when my reminder popped up on my calendar saying the Toyota tour starts. It's like, shit, I'm 2 hours away. I can't do much about it. it's important that you put your contributions in. It's important you have dialogue. And some people have chosen, for whatever is time-wise, not to respond to a discussion board. That's completely okay. Your choice is not going to make you pass or fail, but it's sure going to take marks off the table. And it's important as you start to look at your improvement plan, you should look at that and see where you stand to your improvement plan. By the way, you don't have to adjust anybody. You're just starting your improvement plan, so your initial activity you planned on that, your PDCA improvement plan, you don't need to make a new plan. Just start to plot for the next couple of weeks the new marks coming in and do your plan. Do the plan as you said you were going to do it. It's important that you do the plan because you're going to start to see your marks fluctuate. And if you want to get that 10% higher, that big challenge that you put out there, you need to react now. Okay? And this is now where you're going to learn how to rotate Plan, Do, Check, Act, because the whole idea of a P1 document is an initial document. We don't know everything at the time we make it, but 2 weeks from now we'll know more and we might be able to find something else to do. And 4 weeks from now you have more information available to you that you might be able to adjust it again. So the whole idea is now is the time to start your improvement based on the current marks you've got. And you'll notice I haven't posted your midterm yet. Again, I want to give you data points so that you can build your trend. So post your current situation now, and I will then post your midterms tomorrow. And what you'll get is another mark to see where you are. And then next week, by the way, is the classes live at Seneca, and I will go over your midterms then. The reason I can't do it online is Seneca's policy is you cannot keep an exam document, whether it be a midterm or a final exam. They have to be given to the student, reviewed with the student, and taken back because entrepreneurial students like to sell them to next year's OPM 600 students. And that's what happens. So that's why I cannot allow you to keep your document. And we've had a case of that in OPM 600 several years ago where exams were given to a student and they ended up in the marketplace the next year. And somebody tried to make money on them. Okay? So we don't do that now. So next week's lecture will be at Seneca. It will include the balance of the lecture, and I will cover your midterm exams, but I will post it tomorrow. Don't ask me to explain it to you tomorrow. I'm not going to explain it until next week when you get your exam back, and then you can do it. So you're going to see some good marks and some not so good marks. But those are the marks, and I will also adjust the marks. If I give you back your exam next week and I've made an error, and in the case of one student who remains nameless, they did challenge me on the blog, say that I missed some information. I went back and checked that out, and they were completely correct, and therefore the mark went up 2 points, and their overall score went up. And so you should be. I am human, same as you are. I sometimes miss things, and if I do, I will gladly go back and correct it. I want to give you the best mark that you can based on what you've done. And if I miss something, I will add and adjust it. That's what I do, and we'll do it in midterms. And so don't be afraid to question a midterm, but you better make sure your argument's valid, because again, I know my material pretty well, and when I'm looking for something, I expect a good answer. Now, I've seen some of your 10-point questions on your midterms. 4 lines. You can't answer a 10-point question in 4 lines, guys. That's clearly they didn't know the question, didn't understand the question, and they've answered it as short as they can. And it's not. I'm not about volume, but the content's got to be there. A long comment doesn't make it better than a short comment, but 4 lines on a 10-point question, really? It's not happening. So next week we'll go over the midterm. We'll post the marks so you know coming in where you stand, and then you'll know what you've got to do between now and the end of the term. All right? Okay. It's 12:15. Any other questions?
Can you send me the evaluations of supply chain?
No, I can't send it to you. I want you to send me an email, because then I can document. I'll just add it right to your email. Then it becomes personal. Okay. So send me an email if you. Of course, you'll all want it, and I'll give it to you all. But send it to me, and then over the next couple of days, I'll send them all back to you. All right?
Sure. Thank you.
After that, and then we can discuss. And if you want a personal discussion on it, again, just my virtual office hours are 9 to 10, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. you can just tell me, I'd like to talk to you about this, and we'll set up the appointment so that I can make time on my calendar. But we will do that. All right?
Okay.
Next week.
Have a nice day. Bye. Thank you.
Next week at Seneca, finish chapter 7, and we'll go and we'll go through in detail your midterm exam. All right? Good luck. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, have a good one.